Welcome to Joe's Astrology, and I'm talking about marriage in this video and how to find out what potential partners you might have, how many partners, what your marriage would be like, what some of the challenges are. We can look at all this in astrology, specifically looking at your natal chart, looking at your partner's natal chart, looking at the history, some history if we have it of your life. Contact me if you'd like to do that through an astrology reading. That's the best way to do this. But in this video, I'm just going to take you through some of the things that I've learned and seen that work well in finding out this information. Let's take a look at Aries first, of course. And this is the birth chart of Jennifer Aniston. And she's a Libra rising. So if you're Libra rising, this is for you. Aries on the 7th house cusp. And I'm not going to speak about her, about this chart as it correlates to her life. I'm just going to look at it as if I don't know who she is. And we see, talking about Libra rising, Aries in the 7th house. Aries is a sign that being a fire sign, being a cardinal sign, it likes to start things. It could be associated with romance, passion, and so we could say based on that someone who has Aries in the 7th house cusp would have more romantic options or have romantic situations in the life for sure. Marriages, there could be, based on that, we think with Mars there, that there could be they could be very committed and loyal relationships, but there could be some separations. 1 or 2 or 3 marriages for sure could be associated with Aries in the 7th house. But let's look a little bit closer. And we see that she has nothing in the 7th house, but whole sign we would have Saturn, Venus, and potentially the North Node there at 0 degrees. Remember, the nodes do move backwards, so this is a node at the end of a sign. So Saturn, Venus, and North Node there in Aries. So we look whole sign, we see Saturn there and Venus. Both could be together, could be associated to a long-term relationship, very committed relationship. Saturn could bring some problems, some depressions. What's the word? Maybe morose. Think of words that could describe Saturn. Morose at times, sullen. And that could be the case, but that's to be par for the course with a long-term relationship. But I think those planets there could change the dynamic of the things I mentioned about Aries being on the 7th house cusp. Overall, so far, I would say this is potentially good for long-term romantic and interesting relationships. If we look at the aspects to these planets, Saturn and Venus. Well, before I do that, let's look at the ruler, because we'll come back to that. Because the ruler of the 7th and the 1st are Mars and Venus. And again, having Venus there in that sign is a good indicator that the person's going to probably come into life having an easier time getting into relationships. And then we look at the Mars. The Mars is in Scorpio. Scorpio is the ruler. Mars is the ruler of Scorpio. I talked about Mars and Pluto being good for, and Scorpio being good for longer term, because and commitment, because Scorpio is a fixed sign. Scorpio, Taurus, 2nd house, 8th house. These aspects do like to be committed. They like deep relationships, so we can see maybe some of those qualities coming into her 7th house experience. The Venus is in its fall in Aries. We could consider that as well. They're in a trine phase. I believe it's called a first quarter phase. I forget what's really associated with that. I believe it's crisis in action. But either way, it is a trine. It's moving away from a trine. So again, more likely to have favorable relationships earlier in the life and then later on potentially having issues. We can look at that Mars and see that it is also making an exact sextile to Pluto. So Pluto's involved, potentially making that Mars Scorpio more strong. I would say this is a committed person for sure. We can add Neptune there as well with this Mars. I think with Neptune there, we could consider this very romantic and deep relationship, but not without nebulous, confusing, what's the word? Not really having the ability to understand problems, and if there are any separations or problems, not really understanding them. Could be some cheating, things of that nature with Neptune involved here. I'd say if Neptune wasn't there, with all the other stuff, we still have the romance, but maybe it would have been better without Neptune there. But nonetheless, let me turn my phone off. Nonetheless, these are the ways we would look at that. We can see some of these things here. We could look at some more things as well, because there's a lot in this chart to look at that could give us more of an idea of what's going to happen here. I mean, overall, I would say, without looking any deeper, this person for sure is coming into life with relationships, and if there are separations, would not have a difficult time getting into another committed relationship. So let's move to Taurus.